Hello and welcome to my special Saturday Get in Tune. I think I'm going to be doing these every Saturday for a while. I wanted to come on today. I have my banners up that I take to Comic Cons with me and other trade shows because behind me is quite a mess. So what I wanted to come on and talk about, I had some ideas. There's things I'm doing, things I'm looking to do, and and so I'm just going to talk about a few things. Number one, uh, again, my studio's a mess. Just for those just coming in, that's why my banners are up behind me. I'm going to be redoing my back table and back wall, kind of clean it up a little bit. That's why it's kind of messy. I'm also going to be doing more videos. A lot of different ideas, a lot of different topics. Every Saturday morning at 10 a.m. I'm going to come on, and I'm going to do something about storytelling. And that's what today is going to be about. I have a lot of big things going on right now that I'm not able to talk about, but looks like 2021 might be a very interesting year for me. And some of it has to do with doing these videos, so I have to thank everybody who's been watching. And I'm just getting my stylus. And so what I wanted to do today is, and I'm going to share my screen in a second, talk a little bit about, story. And one of the things that I do or have done is I teach storytelling. Not only have I made comics, and not only have I worked in animation and gaming and stuff, but I've helped develop I've developed a class for a college, and it changed and other people had input later on, but when it was developed, I was the one who developed the storytelling class. And yeah, I've done guest appearances, talked at schools, libraries, all these different places, and I love story. It's one of the reasons I love comics. I mean, comics to me is the quickest way to tell a story. Writing, obviously, yeah, it's probably quicker than drawing a story out, but I like to see my stories visual. I love television shows over movies, but I love comic books over anything. I think I've always said if you have comics are limited to your imagination and your skill with a pencil. So if you could draw it, you can go anywhere. And that's why I love comics, because I can really go to any place that I love. And today I'm going to talk about one of the places that I've loved that I didn't create. Now, growing up, I loved all cartoons. I mean, you put a cartoon in front of me and I watched it. To this day, my probably all-time favorite adventure cartoon probably was Dungeons and Dragons. I think that's one of the few cartoons that hold up to today's standards, and I'm not really going to talk about that cartoon today because that's not what the topic is. It's about another show that I loved, and it's about He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. Now, I've been part of pitch meetings. I've pitched ideas. I've pitched comics. Some had possibilities. Some failed. It's just the way of the biz. But when I get bored, in the sense where I need a break from my own work or a project I'm doing for someone else, what I like to do is create. Some people refer to it as fan fiction, but I don't, because I've worked on pitches. I see myself as someone who could take an idea and pitch it somewhere. And He-Man was one of my favorite childhood cartoons. I had the toys, not all of them, but I had a lot of the toys. I loved the mini comics that came with them, and I have a bunch on the other side of the room. Where is it here? Yeah, I'm not going to be able to get them right now with how messy the studio is. But I do have one book that I love to look through, and it's the art of the Masters of the Universe. Okay? And I can flip through this anywhere, open it up, and see some really nice work from Filmation, the comics. Let's see, anything else? Here's some designs for the movie they made in '86. Was it '86, I think? They have stuff in here for the New Adventures of He-Man, which I might be the only... let's see, I just want to see. I saw some... That's the... Let's see here. Yeah, like this stuff is the New Adventures of He-Man. Okay. Now, I'm one of the few people that really enjoyed that. And what I was thinking of talking about today is my ideas for what if we were to do a He-Man movie. Now, there was one in the works. Last I heard, that it's coming out next year. Who knows if that's true? I haven't kept up with it. I really haven't. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to my screen. I'm just going to sketch a little bit and talk about some ideas I had. So let me share my screen. Now, before I start drawing, I just actually had an experiment that I wanted to do with it. I have Clip Studio Paint here, and I love Clip Studio Paint. It's one of my favorite programs to draw in. But when I seem to share, things don't seem to have smooth lines like when I draw. You see, it's kind of angled. I wanted to figure out why that's happening. But, oh well, I guess it's time to quit that software and hang out in Photoshop. Now, in Photoshop, and you know, I'm just going to give myself the entire the entire screen. You don't need to see me right now. So what I'm going to do is right now I'm just going to sketch, and I have a He-Man piece that I was working on. This was something I shared on my Instagram and on my Facebook. I was playing with, whoops, let me get to the layer. I was playing with, what's the word I'm looking for? Brushes in Photoshop. All right. And then I went over it and I started inking He-Man. I'm not done with him, obviously. And I might work on this in this piece, but I just want to sketch right now and do it. Even played a little bit with color on how I would draw him or color him. I kind of like it, but to be honest, I'm not in the mood to work on it at this time. I'd just rather sketch. So if I feel up to it, I'll come back to it in a little bit. So for those just joining, what I wanted to do was talk about storytelling with you guys. I am, you know, like I said, I've been part of pitches and sorry, I'm just looking for my brush here. So like when I create something that some people might consider fan fiction, I don't, because I've actually pitched places and I know it's something that I can turn around and pitch somewhere else. So I like to take the ideas of other people, of licensed properties that I loved, and say, what if I was given control? How would I create the story? So the reason I picked He-Man is because I know that's one property I'll never get to work on. I have pitches for other things that I've had in development, and I don't want to spoil those right now. So let me just start sketching. And I don't know what I'm going to draw. It may have nothing to do with He-Man, but I did pick He-Man because I love the characters. And so I had this idea a while back for a 5-part He-Man movie. And I love things like Dungeons and Dragons. I love, you know, Lord of the Rings, things like that. So I wanted to make this like an epic story. And I'll just write it down. So part 1, okay, I don't have an actual title for it, but I would call it Pre-Eternia. Was it INA? Eternia. Yeah. The second one was going to be, I'll just call it Brothers for now. The third one was He-Man. The fourth one was The Trials of He-Man. And the last one is The Battle for Grayskull. Whoops, I wrote gay. Sorry, that shouldn't have. I'm a terrible speller. Okay, now this right here is the one I'll talk about today. And what I was going to do, now I loved the mini comics, truly loved the mini comics that came with the action figures. Away in my closet and in one of my boxes there, I have the complete collection of mini comics that came with, you know, that was it IDW, I think, put it out a while back. Was that, who has, I'm sorry, Dark Horse put it out. And I just really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the He-Man comics. I didn't read a lot of the new DC stuff that they had out in the last few years. I did read most of Eternia War. But what I liked, and the idea about Pre-Eternia, or just He-Man in general, is it's called He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. That was what I grew up on. And then later on, it was just Masters of the Universe, because there are so many other characters in there. And there was a story that I really enjoyed in the original cartoon. I don't remember the name of it, but it was like the history of Castle Grayskull. And in the 2000 cartoon series, there was a what was it? There was a story about King Grayskull and basically how the power, what happened to the power and why it's in the sword and stuff. But I had some really fun ideas, what I think are fun ideas, and how I'd recreate it. So the idea is that there's Eternia, okay? And the reason I call it Pre-Eternia, and maybe I should cross that out and just call it Eternia, but the reason is because it's before Eternia as we know it. It's thousands of years ago, maybe 10, 20, even hundreds of thousands of years ago. Who knows? Okay, but I would at least go back, 10, 20,000 years in the story. And in the story, the idea is that there were these, I'll just sketch it out kind of quickly, these druid-like figures. There were 7 of them. And, I'll tell you right now, if this, I know I'll never get to work on He-Man, but if the people watch and end up liking this story, maybe I'll develop it as something of my own, but it won't, obviously I'll change stuff so it won't be He-Man. But so we have these druid-like characters, and they're cloaked. And they're kind of, I don't want to use the word phantasm-like, but, they're mystical, so they can float and they do things, so they have magic. And there's 7 of these guys. Well, I don't want to say guys, it's guys and girls. Okay? And they fight an evil darkness. Now, it's not that the world is all black, covered in darkness, and there's evil in the world. And the evil is referred to as the darkness, and the darkness can possess, right? And it can possess animals, other creatures, humans, whatever it is, and make things dark. So like let's say it took over some forest, right? And now that forest, going into that forest, is not safe. Trees could come to life, plant life could come to life, things like that. It's kind of it's you know, it's almost like they're possessed. Could they be cleansed? I don't know. Maybe that's what these 7 do. But eventually, what happens is the darkness is going to destroy these guys, and they know they're going to lose. So to protect themselves, they transform all of themselves into one giant orb. It's just this giant orb of power. It's highlight, that's the highlight. It's got this giant orb of power. It glows bright, and in its place, it left 2 babies, a boy and a girl. All right? Whoops, Girl. See, terrible speller. So you have this boy and this girl, and I'm sorry, I'm blanking for a second. So I have this boy and this girl that are left. They're babies, and they're twins, right? Now, this orb is their teacher. It's their parents. It nurtures them. It feeds them. It protects them, and it grows them up to being 2 very powerful magic users. All right, but the boy is tempted by the dark. Okay, so the boy becomes dark. Eventually, he'll embrace the dark, and he'll lead the dark, and he'll become the first character to like the first real magic user that this darkness has overtaken, and he wants to control. He wants power. I don't look at this as God versus the devil. I look at it as almost like Cain and Abel instead, and he becomes a character that we've heard of, but we've never really seen, and he becomes Horde Prime. He's the leader of everything. He absorbs it. He is so powerful that he can control the darkness now. Okay? He controls this, and he starts raising an army, and that's why he's Horde Prime. He's the first of the creation of the orb. All right? The girl grows up, and she is worshipped as a goddess. Now, I don't know if you guys have ever read any of the original He-Man comics. And I'm talking the mini comics that came with the toys. But the original He-Man comics that came with the toys, the first 4, I think it was, or 5 little mini comics, He-Man was not Prince Adam. That came later. He was just a barbarian, and he was given magical armor that protected him and gave him extra strength. He was just this great barbarian by a goddess. And what I want to do is I want to try to combine the things I love from the TV series, the different ones, even the New Adventures of He-Man, which I might be the only fan of out there. From the mini comics I grew up on, from the TV series, probably gonna not do anything from the movie. That was from the '80s, because that, to me, it's a cult kind of thing, fun thing to watch sometimes, but it's just a bad He-Man movie. And just stuff from the comics and things that I've enjoyed. So I've always enjoyed the idea of Horde Prime. So Horde Prime is the first. He goes off and starts raising an army. The goddess here, I never gave her a name, because I wanted to make her the idea of the goddess, and the goddess was kind of like the sorceress in the original cartoon or in the original comic. So I wanted her to be the goddess, the first character out there to have that idea of the power. So she's going to find and raise an army, okay? And the 2 armies are going to go to war. Obviously, because that's what armies do, right? And there's going to be one great warrior. He's going to be the original He-Man, if you will. The original guy from the comics, but he's not He-Man, because we're going 10, 20,000 years before He-Man was even a thought, right? He is known as Grayskull. He's just a great barbarian. And she provides him, you know, and he'll look different too, because, you know, even though, you know, he might have, you know, he'll have his muscles here and whatnot, but I'd probably, you know, being a barbarian, maybe give him a beard, big beard here. You know, I'm doing quick drawings. This isn't my great work here. Maybe, actually, I'd probably give him maybe like a headband or something that the hair comes in and out of, just from those days. Angry looking guy. And he's this great heroic warrior. You know, maybe he does have some kind of battle armor on him, but it's not what we know for He-Man, not until she gives it to him. All right, this is a little more reminiscent maybe of the New Adventures of He-Man here. Who knows? Okay. But maybe he does have some kind of symbol. I don't know. And you know what? We'll make it a skull, because he's Grayskull. Whoops, I didn't take the eraser. Okay, so there's Grayskull right there. That's the original Grayskull. And he becomes the major champion, right? And because he is the hero, you know, and he becomes the protector of all that is good. Excuse me. Sorry, I had to take a sip of water. He becomes part of something that all that is good. And there was a saying, and I think it was an episode titled "The New Adventures of He-Man." And I don't like to keep going back to that because, you know, it is a show people don't really count as a He-Man cartoon. But there was something that I liked about it, a saying that I liked about it, and it was, I think it was, by the power. I think it was by the power of good. In the way of the magic. Now, I'm only going with that, and that's all I really want to do as the New Adventures of He-Man are concerned. I don't care about the mutants or any of that stuff for this story. I just want them to have you know, have that. And I think that's a good motto for the goddess, you know, because she is good and she is magical, and by worshiping her and by following her, she is following, you know, they're following the power of good, they're following the way of magic. And Grayskull here is the main one to do so. So during this battle, he is the one who, I don't want to say vanquishes Horde Prime, because Horde Prime doesn't die. Horde Prime will be banished. He will slow down Horde Prime to the point where the goddess can take the power, to use her power to banish him to another realm. Okay. Now, when I say he's got an army, though, think about characters like orc-like characters and other creatures that you would see not just in the world of He-Man, but maybe in the world of D&D. You know, you got to realize He-Man came about in, I think it premiered in '83. Before that, there was a show called Black Star that some people say is the forerunner, and they just copied Black Star. They didn't. But Black Star, to me, is one of my all-time favorite shows. I love the concept. I love the idea, and that's another thing I would love to pitch one day. Maybe I'll do a story on that, because I don't know if I'll ever get to work on Black Star. But in 1977, I think we all know, May 25th, which is now celebrated as Geek Pride Day, is the day Star Wars came out. And Star Wars changed the way of storytelling, and it became, everything kind of had this sci-fi adventure stuff that also dealt with some primitive aspects of I don't know if you want to say warriors or whatnot. For example, you have Thundar the Barbarian, who instead of, he had a sun sword instead of a lightsaber, so he had a fire sword. There was I don't remember the girl's name. Was it Princess Ariel? Maybe, I don't remember. But she was she had her magical powers, and then you had Ukala the Muck, who was basically Chewbacca. Black Star comes along, and Black Star is about an astronaut who gets sent through a black hole and lands on the planet Sagar and meets the Trobbits, who, think of them like tree hobbits. They live in a tree and they're basically hobbit-like characters. And he gets half of a sword, the sun. I think it's the sun sword or the star. No, he gets the star sword. Sorry, the star sword. And there's a villain called the Overlord who has the other half, and when they come together, they're just, I think it forms the Power Star. I gotta remember. I don't remember everything, but I love that show. And he had a female magician, and he had a guy named Clone who was able to, what's the word I'm looking for? Able to change shapes and stuff. And then we had other shows that came out in the 80s. You had Goltar and the Golden Lance, which was basically a fantasy story with a guy with dual lightsabers for the most part. Everything, and He-Man was a big thing. So it had spaceships, it had laser guns, it had swords, it had magic. So it Star Wars changed the way we look at things. So you have these guys who are magical in He-Man, and like the sorceress or whatever, and oh my god, all of a sudden, there's the force of the story. And this is how I look at it. I'm not saying people out there have said this. This is what I'm saying. You got He-Man with a magic sword, just like Luke Skywalker had a magic sword, and and they had great spaceships, just like Star Wars had great spaceships. And you can go back, and if you really study storytelling, you can look up Joseph Campbell, who basically defined storytelling as we know it, and says that everything's kind of connected, and in that connection, characters, well, in stories from every culture, there are characters that overlap, and that they all have their own jobs. So you got the hero, you got the shadow or the villain, you got the sidekicks, you got the shapeshifter. In Star Wars, that's like Han Solo, who started off as kind of this I don't care kid, and then comes out to, I'm back and I help you destroy the Death Star. So you got these, you got a meeting of a goddess, if you will. You got all these things, and I'm not here to talk about Joseph Campbell, because people pay me to come in and teach storytelling. So that's part of my lessons. But I saw a lot of Star Wars as I looked back on it in He-Man. And I love Star Wars, well, the original stuff, and I love He-Man, and I thought, why can't we do a cool movie that kind of embrace that? But even before that, let's take something else that I love, like Lord of the Rings, like Dungeons and Dragons, and bring these great monsters and great type of characters, have villages of elves and dwarves, and make up creatures like Star Wars did, and have your own thing, have dragons, which has appeared in He-Man, but have all these great things at the beginning, these giant battle of good and evil. And this battle is going to be a long part of the movie. I don't want to say a long part, but it should be at least, I would say it would take at least a half hour. There's so much to this. Okay? Now, when all this is over and the battle is over, and Grayskull has saved, has defeated Horde Prime enough that the goddess can banish him, Grayskull is weak. He's dying. But he swears that his children and his children's children will always be there, to protect the power of the good. and the way of the magic. And his son is the next in line, and he becomes the first King Grayskull. And in the name of really his father, they build a giant castle named Castle Grayskull, obviously, where the orb hides. It resides in somewhere deep within the castle that is protected, has all knowledge of like nature and Eternia, and it's there to help keep the balance in Eternia. The goddess, and eventually she'll have an actual name, she becomes the first sorceress. She's kind of like the King Grayskull's Merlin. And what was I going to say? Sorry. And we go until we come to the era of King Grayskull that we know from the 2000 cartoon series. Okay? And that's going to be very similar to what happened in the cartoon, I think. I'm not going to change that. I wouldn't change that too much because I really like the way they did it. The only thing I would do is add kind of a story of how Hordak became Hordak. I don't know if they ever told that story. I got to be honest, I don't remember. But I've had this idea where Hordak was kind of this orphan, and he kind of grew up, on the streets, stealing things to survive. But being in prison, being just a guy who gets bullied, and he can't defend himself really, and he's finally in prison, and he's brought into this mine. He's there to mine as punishment. And inside this mine, while he gets trapped in a cave-in, and he thinks he's going to die. So he's able to find a way to see if he's looking to see if there's another way out. And he comes across this item. It's stuck in a wall, and it's shiny. It attracted him to it, but it looks like nothing he's ever mined before. And as he kind of digs it out, like a black ooze pours out, and it touches him. And as it's touching him, it's turning him into... It's hurting him, but it's turning him into Hordak. But he's being spoken to this whole time. As he's being engulfed in this black ooze, he's being talked to, and it's the voice of Horde Prime. And Horde Prime is giving him the choice. And if he doesn't accept Horde Prime's offer, he's just going to kill this guy. Because Horde Prime or the Horde needs a human vessel to help bring the age of the Horde into this realm. So without this kid's help, the ooze is just going to lay there and possibly do nothing unless somebody else ever came across it. But the guy doesn't want to die, and he's being offered all this great power, and he accepts it. And that's when Hordak is first, the way we know him. All right, he's given magical powers, he's given all this stuff, and the way the magic works for him, it allows him... Do I want to use the word? I'll say transform. I was going to say transmute, but transforms his body into weapons. Okay, it can come laser guns. He can make an axe into his hand into an axe, things like, and just fight. So it's a little different, but I still wanted to keep some of the tech version of him in there. But he has magical powers, and he starts bringing back a horde army, or starts forming an army. And he gets all these beings, and again the orcs are coming back, and it's all these weird creatures, and he's finally going up against the new King Grayskull, and obviously there's a new sorceress, and all these um, I'm sorry, I'm just looking at something. I just got a text. I think I need to look at it real quick, but oh, never mind. I didn't need to look at it. Sorry. Sometimes I get business stuff on Saturdays too. Sorry, guys. And anyway, Hordak is doing battle. Battle goes on. King Grayskull's there. King Grayskull, though, has a sister, a twin sister. I haven't given her a name either. I just call her the princess right now. And excuse me. I don't know what's going on with my throat today. Let me have another sip of water. So King Grayskull has a sister I call the princess. She can communicate with animals. She has telepathy. She's a great healer, but she's also a great warrior. However, King Grayskull does not, I don't think, would consider her too much of an equal to him. She's a woman, and though women can have great power, it's his sister, and he wants to protect his sister, so he doesn't like having her fight. But the battle's coming, and they all fight, just like in the cartoon episode. And like I even wrote this little funny, what I thought was funny in there, where King Grayskull's talking to his wife, and she's telling him, "You can't win. This is a death sentence. You know, the whole thing." And he gives her a kiss and tells her not to worry, that he has the power. And I thought that would just be a little cute, funny scene, to kind of reference later on having the power of Grayskull. So anyway, later on, Grayskull is severely wounded. He's going to die. The magic armor that has been passed down for thousands of years into excuse me, that the original Grayskull wore, that was giving him to by the goddess, is being destroyed. Okay, it's breaking. The magic is leaking out, and all the magic users get together and try to control this magic, and pushes the magic into King Grayskull's sword. So they all come together. They all save the power of Grayskull that way. And it ends, in my eyes, with King Grayskull's funeral. And in that, the princess speaks. And another great thing, and this is to kind of hint to She-Ra later, but at the end, when she speaks to the entire crowd of his people, of his soldiers, of everybody who loved King Grayskull, she takes her sword, holds it up high, and says, "For the honor of Grayskull." And they all just cheer, "The honor of Grayskull," you know? And, you know, I think it's a nice little touch to add a classic feel to it. Well, to what we know as classic. And that is, and that's kind of where the story would end, you know? Maybe I can do another one here. But the story would end, obviously, with that. And I do have an idea, because if you and I don't think this was ever part of the original story, but you know, they have two swords, and however it looked, and Skeletor had one, and He-Man had one, and it was they had to, what's it called? You put them together and there was power. I do have an idea for that, but I don't want it to be a part of the original story of the sword. I want it to actually come out in no, not Brothers, sorry. I wanted to come out in He-Man. Okay. Or the Trials of He-Man, one of the two, I don't remember right now. But the reason this sword is so powerful, and I remember reading it, I don't remember what comic or if it was in one of the cartoons, but it was made from a special metal that came from Trala, which was Orko's homeworld. And I don't want that to be the original sword. That is going to be a sword, or might be a cool idea to have it thousands of years old, and that's why it stays up. So maybe that would be Grayskull's original sword, you know, and it was given to him because of the power. It was blessed by the goddess, meaning, you know, she not just kind of said, "I bless you," or whatever. She kind of was there in the forge and sprinkled maybe some magic on it or whatever. So yeah, we'll do it that way. We'll keep the sword, the original Grayskulls, and it's just passed down along with the other stuff. All right. Now with Brothers, I don't want to go too much into it because honestly, it is, I don't know if I can do it all in the time frame I wanted to be here for. But so we just did that one. Now, Brothers. The idea of Brothers, and again, these titles are working titles. I think Brothers is a terrible title for it. Brothers is the story. I like the idea of how Keldor, who becomes Skeletor, and King Randor are brothers. And I want them growing up. I want Keldor to be the oldest. Okay. So Keldor is oldest, right? And so he's next in line for the throne. And I want to set it up that way because it helps set up a lot of good things that happen. So, excuse me. So they grow up. They're good friends. Keldor is not always a bad guy. Actually, as a teenager, he befriends Beastman. Now, my Beastman story, you know, I don't see him as that type of the Beastman that we know right away. I kind of see him, you know, this really sickly, sad-looking, you know, creature. Whatever, that's supposed to be Claws. Don't think he's Merman. You know, and he's just really sick, kind of, you know, just like he's supposed to be. He's kind of ape-like, but not 100%. And he's got a lot of hair on him, but he's... And it's probably going to have an orangish tint or reddish tint to his fur. Right? So what my idea for Beastman was that somebody who was he was part of a tribe of Beastman-like characters, but he was sickly, he was weak, and he was banished because, you know, he couldn't survive on his own. So they really left him out to die. And he was trying to hunt. I think I wrote it, the way I created it was that he was kind of fishing, like in the lake, trying to catch fish with his hands, and really messing up and falling and almost in tears, if you will, and angry and just, you know, whatever. But Keldor was on a hunting trip, and he was by himself. He was just out hunting in the woods, and he comes across this creature who he thinks he should kill. He's like, "Oh, there's a beast. I will have him for my trophy." And then he feels sad for the guy because he's watching him, and he feels for him, and he decides not to kill him, but instead help him. And in return, this creature kind of attaches himself to him. He acts as Keldor's kind of servant, you know. But being a servant to Keldor is, to him, to serve Keldor is a sign of friendship. You know, he's thanking him, and he'll always be in his. And Keldor took care of him. All right. Now with Marlena, Randor's wife, she's actually an Earthling, and the story is she's an astronaut. She goes through some kind of wormhole and crash lands on Earth. She is found by both Randor and Keldor, and both fall in love with her on sight. They think she is the most beautiful thing, and that's where the rivalry begins. The real rivalry begins for Keldor and Randor. It wasn't over the throne, it was over a woman. And sorry, I'm getting another sip of water. And it becomes almost like the Trojan War. Was it the Trojan War? Was that the one where Helen of Troy, there was Trojan War. They were coming back to you know. So basically, they fight over her. You know, Keldor is jealous because Marlena obviously is falling for Randor, and he tries to really, I don't know, just really mess things up. And I don't want to tell the whole story, because I think I might write it out or even storyboard these one day, a little bit different scenes, and just put them up online as animatics, maybe on my YouTube page or something. And and I do want to have some surprises for anyone who's interested in this stuff if I choose to do it. Anyway, they kind of fight each other. Randor, their father is not too pleased, and when he sees what's happening, he has to banish Keldor, no matter how much he wants to, because Keldor is trying to kill Randor. Now Keldor has always worked with the court's magician, and he knows a little magic, so he's always kind of been a little magical, but he wasn't the greatest magician out there. I mean, he wasn't as bad as Orko, but he was no he was no sorceress level. And what's going to happen is eventually Keldor has to leave, and the Beastman character sides with him, obviously, and leaves with him because of his loyalty. And they go out together into the woods, and all these travels. And while he's traveling to gain power to come back, because now he's like, I will gain power, I'll come back, I'll take my revenge on both the father and his brother, and whether he cares if Marlena is his or not doesn't really matter anymore to him. He just wants his family to pay. And he comes across, they come across this old temple, and it turns out to be abandoned for centuries. I mean, it's covered in whatever, moss, vines. It's disgusting. No one should even be in there. But they need shelter, and they go in, and it turns out to be a temple to the Horde. And in this temple, there's a statue of Hordak. And Hordak, he reads this old, well, it's Horde speech, but or the language written down, but he's able to read it because of his magical abilities. He casts a spell to help him understand, and it says, something like it, make it some kind of sacrifice. So, like, let's say he cuts his hand and drips blood into whatever, and all of a sudden the spirit of Hordak appears, if you will. I don't want to call it the spirit, because he's banished as well. And he offers Keldor great power. And with this great power, he will be able to take revenge on his family, but he's going to have to listen to, he's going to have Hordek as his boss, and at the end, Horde Prime is Hordek's boss. So whatever Horde Prime says, if they can communicate, Skeletor will have to do his bidding as well. And he gives him the power, and that's when he loses the face. Now, I will say this. I always liked the Evil Lyn character a lot, and I like that her and Keldor had a romantic relationship, so she will be part of the story, but she will always... And there will be a thing where Evil Lyn and Keldor will have some kind of relationship, but once Marlena comes into the picture, things change, and it's not like it was anything real to Keldor to begin with between the two of them, but she's madly in love with him. So she's there as well, and she sees what happens to him. And by the way I wrote this is that Evil Lyn, and in a lot of stories, in some stories actually, I think her name was Evelyn before she became Evil Lyn. She was a student with the wizard, with the court wizard before before all this stuff. So her and Keldor were like, magic buddies, much like Teela and Adam are training together in the original He-Man stories. So that's why I don't want to say she sides with him, but she goes with him out of love. And she sees what, and she stays with for the whole time. She stays with him until that day. I want him. I always liked the story they did of the Faceless One, where he holds some magical items that are not not held within Grayskull. So I kind of wanted to keep that in there. And in the new He-Man cartoon from the 80s, I don't like calling, not the 80s, from the 2000s, I don't like calling it new, but it was the most recent one. The Faceless One was Evil Lyn's father. Would I keep that? I'm not sure. Excuse me. I do like it. I do like, though, that he had the Havoc staff, and that the Ram logo, because they had a episode, I believe, about, I don't remember if it was the classic or now or not, but it was a ram stone or something it was called, and then they have the Havoc staff, which has a ram's head. So I like the idea of him having the Havoc staff there, and Evil Lyn comes to help claim it with Beastman. Oh, I totally left out the Beastman thing. For his loyalty, Skeletor uses his new power when Keldor becomes Skeletor to raise Beastman to a level that he is, that we know him as. He's smarter than the average average Beastman. He can actually talk. He can communicate with animals. He can do things that he couldn't do before, and become strong. And the sickly beast is gone, and his loyalty to Skeletor is there. So he continues to be loyal. He continues all of that. And really the story will end with the battle happening, Skeletor being defeated by his brother, and and the other guards and all that stuff. But the king will die in that battle, and he will die at Skeletor's hands. And that's how Randor becomes king, and he proposes to Marlena. Marlena becomes his queen, and then it ends with her being pregnant and saying, I'm pregnant, or something like that. And it's a little bit of a happy ending, although there's some sadness there. But that will lead to He-Man. That'll lead to the kidnapping of Adora, so that we can do a She-Ra story somewhere down the line. But the next one, and I'm not going to talk about this one because I do kind of want to end in a few minutes, This is the one where we're going to see Adam as a kid. We're going to see the story of Adam growing up, meeting He-Man, the story of Teela when she was born. Like, all that stuff's going to happen. And I'll end with him becoming He-Man. But you got to remember, I know this sounds like we're taking a long time to get to He-Man because it'll be like the last, maybe... We probably won't see him until an hour into the film, the way I'm planning this in my head. But I'm thinking of a real epic. I'm thinking Lord of the Rings style. I'm thinking, you know, adding in some Star Wars elements to this. More D&D, everything like that. That is, this would be an epic. Now, I know, like I said, I know they're making a He-Man movie, or at least they said they were. Last I heard, it was supposed to come out March 2021, but who knows if that's accurate or if that's even happening today. But again, this is if I was given the opportunity to pitch He-Man, this is what I would do with it. I will say it could go different, this Brothers movie, and you can move the whole Keldor story becoming Skeletor over to the He-Man part story as well. So it's kind of like they were both born at the same time, in a way, both the characters. But I still think the battle is important. I still think Keldor gaining more magical powers, and that's how he defeats and kills his father, and is an important part to the story. But I want to make it that Evelyn is much more powerful than Keldor, which is the main reason he was not in love with her as she thought he was, because he didn't like someone more powerful than him. And he didn't like that. He wanted to be the most powerful. And so there's jealousy, there's anger in him. And when he gets more powerful, then he's okay with Evelyn. And there will be, I was thinking, speaking of Evelyn, if we do keep her name Evelyn, the idea would be after Keldor gains the power, whether he becomes Skeletor in that movie or not, although the way I have it in my head, he does, there's like a Darth Vader christening, like, rise my apprentice type of thing. Sorry, that was a bad impression. And she is dubbed Evelyn by Skeletor. And he could take the Havoc staff or some kind of wand and kind of touch her with it, and there's something that transformed, almost like a mind control, maybe. I don't know. I've had lots of different thoughts on how that can happen, but I have this whole thing in my head where Keldor, or Skeletor, however you want to say his name, after he gains that power from Hordak, he had, and he raises Beastman. He then kind of, like, knights Evelyn, and he knights Beastman. Like, he'll say that, however he does it, he says, "You are Beastman, rise. You are Evelyn, arise." And that is, that's how I see that. So there's a lot of fun stuff. I know I'm leaving out a lot of stuff that I've written down. I have a lot of notes. I have a lot of fun things I've done with this, but this is never going to be made. This is never the story we're ever going to see. And I just thought I'd like to share it with you guys. Next week on Saturday, I'll do another story time type of thing, whether I continue with this He-Man, which I think I will. I'd like to continue and just finish up this story, or talk about a different property, or just something else about storytelling. It really is like my favorite thing to do. I love making up characters, making up stories, and if I could take this and turn this into a story for my own, using different names, using different characters. I love to draw fantasy. I love to draw magic. I love to draw sci-fi. I can really combine all my loves into a story like this, which I might do. Obviously names will change, but and I can say, hey, yeah, this was inspired by He-Man, and it was based on something I wrote. Like I mentioned Black Star. Black Star is something I'd really actually like to pitch, so I'm not going to share it with anyone. But if I don't, and I have a lot written down already, but if I don't get the opportunity to pitch him, say in the next couple of years, I'll take that story that I wrote for him and just rewrite it completely, take out all the real Black Star elements and keep it, as a story that I want, and I'll write my own story. So, I'll give it a different character. It'll be sci-fi based again. It'll have a different villain. It'll have the fantasy aspect. It'll have everything that I love. And but these cartoons really inspired what I do as today. And I watched. I watched cartoons like crazy as a kid. I drew comics. I read comics. I drew comics. Though I love superheroes and I love DuckTales and stuff, some of my favorite stuff to read was like Conan. I loved reading like all that fantasy and things, and that's what inspires the work I do. I'm sorry I didn't work on the He-Man piece today. Maybe next week, or maybe I'll work on it throughout the week and show it next week. But just to show it again, this is a piece I'm working on. And this is just for fun, but this is because I've been talking He-Man with people for the last 2 weeks or so, and that's why I wanted to do this. Like, oh, I got this great idea. I want to do this, and what am I gonna what's gonna happen with it? And I wrote this. This started maybe 2013, 2014. I started plotting these ideas out. So, excuse me. So that's what, 6, 7 years, maybe almost 8, that I've been playing. I've had this idea in my head that I go to every now and then and play with. I'll never get to see this created. I still might do a storyboard, but I think this is going to become a story. Maybe I'll do the same with Black Star. I have ideas for so many licensed properties, but I think we all have that if we grew up in that era. Or if you grew up in a different era than me and you're like, oh, I love Star Trek growing up. And I was a Next Gen fan. I'm not a big Star Trek guy, but I did enjoy the Next Generation. That was my era. You'd like, oh, I have a Star Trek story I'd love to see done. Or I have a Star Wars story. Or, I've been watching Spider-Man so much. I'd love to see this Spider-Man story, And, we all get it. And people, for the most part, will call it fan fiction. Because if you write it or draw it, you're doing it because you're a fan. And this could be considered fan fiction. I'm not going to deny that. But because I work in the industry, because I do have been part of pitches, this is something that, given the opportunity, I could develop into a pitch. So I never look at it as fan fiction. I look at it as, this is business for me. And I do hope it turns into something. So you guys, I want to thank you for watching. Follow me on Instagram at Michael Grassia. You can see it behind me. It's spelled, where is it? Right here, Grassia. You can find me on YouTube at the same, Twitter at the same. Facebook is Michael Grassia Studios, or In TOON, which is this side here, wherever I'm pointing. I do Twitch. I'm very new to, so I'll be on that on and off. I'm going to try to build that channel a little bit, but I'm more on YouTube. I'm more on Facebook, and I hope to start building my Twitch channel a little bit. But that's ToonMaker76, so it's TOON Maker 76 as my name. I don't have anything made up for that yet. But thanks, guys, for tuning in. I hope to see you guys next Saturday. And, have a great rest of your weekend. Bye, guys.